Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Social 360 panel. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I hope you were all inspired after that awesome kickoff by Casey. We're looking forward to spending the next hour with you and really sharing the experience of our very talented panelists. And I want to stop for a moment just to explain why it's called 360. And it's because there are so many avenues and so many paths as a professional that you can take when it comes to social. So many opportunities around you, from the agency and client side to the publisher and sales side, creative, content development, community management, organic and paid. So it's a really rich territory to pursue. So we wanted you to get a glimpse into the various roles. But before we dive in, I'd like to thank our sponsor. And it is a bit of a coincidence that, yes, I'm the Chief Client Officer at Assembly. I'm both sponsoring and moderating the session, but in all seriousness, it's really a big thanks to our sponsors because we couldn't have this packed agenda without them. So without further ado, we're going to start with introductions, and our panelists are going to tell us a little bit about themselves, the journeys that they've gone on in order to get to where they are today. So I'd like to kick it over to Shelby to get us started.
Yeah, good morning, guys. My name is Shelby Adkins, and I'm currently a senior associate on paid social at Mindshare, New York for Unilever. So I work across Unilever beauty brands and deodorant brands such as Tresemme, Suave, and Nexus, but then also Degree and Dove. And then prior to moving to New York last year, I was also at Starcom Publicist Collective on the FCA team, where I got to work with Jenn for a couple of weeks. We had some overlap. And then I actually worked for Adcraft right out of college for almost 2 years, starting in a membership and then rolled into social, mainly organic, but we were doing some paid stuff at the same time for larger events like D-Show and AdCon. And I got started in the industry through Adcraft events like AdCon. My first AdCon was in 2015, and I went to pretty much every single Adcraft event I could possibly go to in my crazy school schedule. And I also interned in software in Ann Arbor while I was in college. And then I worked for the Henry Ford Museum while I was in college as well for project management. So through my Adcraft experience, I met Michelle Rosso, the executive director, and she hired me right after college. So that's how I got started.
Excellent. Thank you, Shelby. What about you, Jenn?
Yeah, so I actually did not start in advertising. I have a journalism degree and I started in journalism. So my first gig out of college, I was working as a freelancer for some newspapers, and I eventually started working for the Detroit Free Press. And as I was doing that, I was working on the website of things, and we were driving a lot of traffic. A lot of traffic to the site was coming from social platforms. So I got very interested in social media and then made the jump to work at an agency. So I ended up at Campbell Ewald, where a number of us in this panel worked together. And at that point, there was not a lot of paid social support. So most of us were working in an organic capacity, moderating, Facebook pages and Twitter accounts, and even some of the more prevalent social platforms like Snapchat wasn't out yet. Pinterest was just getting started. And that slowly evolved over the years. I went to work on the brand side for a little bit. I worked at Little Caesars, handling their social media, and then eventually made my way back to the agency world. And I've been at the agency world for about 5 or 6 years now straight after Little Caesars, and I've spent the last 3 years at Assembly leading paid search and paid social out of our Detroit office, and most recently I'm leading up the social efforts across our department. So focusing on paid for a number of different clients, both local, such as Hungry Howie's, and some national brands like Got Milk.
Awesome. Imagine a world without Snapchat. All right, Benjie.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Benjie Klein. So I'm currently Vice President of Platform Strategy at Weber Shandwick, working solely on the Chevrolet account because it is always a beast when you have to work on some of these large automotive brands. My current role is really just to set a lot of the POVs on what platforms we're using, how we're using them, both from an organic standpoint, but also giving recommendations on what we do from a paid and media standpoint, and working with clients to make sure we are kind of going straight forward. Our big win coming up is we have Chevy's finally going to launch on TikTok. So I've been working on that one for a year. Prior to Weber Shandwick, I was at GTB / Team Detroit, whatever they're calling it these days. And the my role there was social publishing manager. So managed a team of social publishers more from an organic perspective, really help them develop a lot of the content and how we execute on the channels there. Also, before that, previous experience was at a startup called Stratos for a year, doing their social media management, doing a lot of their emails and all that fun stuff. Prior to that, as John mentioned, a lot of people have Campbell Ewald experience from back in the day. So that's where I got my marketing start and advertising start. So worked on all sorts of fun accounts there, and had a bunch of different roles there, anything from kind of social media planner and community management into more of a analytics role, which was I did a lot on the Cadillac side. And then, you know, my journey here has been a little bit of a strange one as well. I started working at the Detroit Tigers back in 2006 in the box office for customer service and will call, and then I decided it wasn't for me, and I ended up going to grad school focusing on communications. And then when I was actually working doing some web production stuff with Fox 2, I started kind of falling in love with the social media side, and then ended up going from there.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, sorry, and Jen.
Hi, so I'm Jen. I am the paid social director at Reprise Digital. We have offices in Birmingham and Detroit, and I started in college doing PR for internships and everything like that, and then shifted into Campbell Ewald when I graduated, worked in account coordination and got to see what all of the different branches did, what the creative teams did, what the media team did, all of that fun stuff, and really did fall into a passion for media because of Adcraft, and talking to everybody at AdCons when I went, and fell into that passion of media. And then it was buying and planning media, and then moving to different agencies, buying and planning media, and then kind of fell into social, because as everyone has kind of mentioned, it wasn't really a thing for a while where you had to pay for social, and then you were paying for followers, and then nobody pays for followers. So kind of fell into it because there was a need for it. And ever since then, I have been doing paid social planning and strategy and buying. So that's where I am right now.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the role you play, and please tell us what that looks like from a day-to-day perspective. Shelby?
Yeah, so at my role, I'm doing a lot of media planning and activation. So we activate across Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, and TikTok. So a lot of day-to-day processes are just putting together recommendations. This is the first time my client paused all of their media on Twitter and Facebook during the climate over the summer. So we haven't ran in 6 months. So this was our first time planning everything out for an onboarded client and actually seeing it come to life this month. So that has been a lot of fun, but there's a lot of nitty gritty, just building the campaigns and platform, and making sure we're QAing and activating those for our client.
Excellent, thank you. And John?
Yeah, so my day-to-day is very much lately involved with onboarding new clients. So we recently won the Got Milk business. So we are taking the iconic Got Milk campaign and rebranding it. So we have team members that are working on the creative side of things. On my side, I'm working to help get promotions and programs set up for the spring. So we're setting up our challenges for TikTok, setting up AR lenses for Snapchat. We're setting up our media plans and buys for Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest, and we'll be presenting that to the client in the next few days. And so there's a lot going on there. When I'm not focusing on that, there's a number of process changes or execution that we have to work on. So although we're planning items, we're also activating things that are in the market for other clients. So on any given day, we might have about 20 or 30 clients in the market with campaigns. And so there's a lot of different ads that we have to monitor, and so we have to make sure that everything's working well. With all of that activity in market, sometimes there's glitches with campaigns, or there's questions that we need to have answered. So there's a lot of meetings with different vendors, all of our social representatives, or maybe other partners that we use for tools and automation, and just making sure that all of those things are running smoothly, and also a little bit of staffing. So as we have new clients, making sure we're staffing up and making sure the teams are balanced appropriately. So those are the things that take up the most of my time right now. But I think for a paid like social media professional, a lot of the work that you might do is looking at analytics or hands-on keyboard executing campaigns and watching those campaigns to make sure that the clients are getting the best media value for their dollars.
Excellent. You're probably all seeing a pattern here. There really is no standard or typical day-to-day, and when you think your day is going one way, it quickly pivots, particularly given the marketplace. So let's hear from you, Benjie.
Yeah, totally. So I actually like to consider myself the ultimate consultant at my job. So from a day-to-day basis, I do a lot of different things. I create briefs for the creative team so I can take them through to see what they want to develop from a creative standpoint. I work on platform strategies. So depending on where we want to be next, whether it's, obviously you have your Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams, et cetera, that are kind of the main standbys. I work on platforms and helping kind of integrate new things for people. So I introduced our clients to Clubhouse recently. TikTok, as I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn is a big transition as to what we're looking to do from a Chevrolet standpoint. So just trying to get people up to date and understanding the platforms that we're going to be approaching. I also give a lot of POVs on, what are we doing from a media standpoint? What are some of our organic pieces as their potential to put money behind it in that regard? I work with the analytics team to make sure that any of the data that they are producing does get translated into the strategy and then into the creative team as well. So, a little bit of everything. And then, I like to also kind of work closely with the tools that we're using. So, social media, especially from an organic standpoint, you'll have a lot of tools. And so I like to make sure that everyone is trained on those from our team perspective. So I help them through that and work with kind of the GM COE team to make sure that everyone is kind of up to speed and aligned with how we're supposed to be operating our processes.
Excellent. Thank you, Benjie. And how about you, Jenn?
Yeah, so I would say most of my day is spent problem solving. As the director on our accounts, I am working with our teams to make sure everything is delivered properly. All of that delivery is shared with clients properly, and that clients' needs are all met. And that we're making sure we deliver the best strategy, the best product, the best performance for all of the clients that we work on. So a lot of it is problem solving on a day-to-day basis where clients come to us with a problem and we have to strategize what the best solution is for that particular problem within paid social. So whether that's their need entries for a contest or they are trying to reach a very specific, very niche audience that's a near market audience or something like that, we try and find the best solutions for them. So that is most of my day. A lot of my day is also spent reading and researching and making sure that our teams are all up to date on the latest. Benjie brought up Clubhouse, and that was something this past week that we have been looking into and researching. We did recently launch on TikTok. So this past quarter, we learned a whole new platform, and I set up all the meetings with our TikTok representatives to make sure that everybody knew what we were doing when we were doing it. So yeah, that's most of my day to day.
Excellent. And the whole problem solving that is from entry level all the way up to the most senior. So yes, definitely having that as a mindset is important. All right, now let's get a little nitty gritty and kind of get into the details. And if you're creating campaigns, so putting us in the campaign creation world for a product or a brand, what's your role in making that come to life?
Yeah, so for me, I'll use Axe body spray as an example. It's something I'm working closely to right now. It's a younger brand, so they're a little more innovative. So during Q4, we started out the media planning process and just digging into the audiences that are available, what platforms make the most sense for such a young brand, kicking off creative calls with the client to see what they want it to look like, also with our partners. And Axe is really big on Snapchat and TikTok, which is pretty new to the game, but planning that all out. And then also the senior associates and the associates, the actual activation comes into play for us. So we're building those campaigns, we're trafficking the tags for those, we're placing the buys, and we're QAing to make sure that everything is perfect before we send it to our client to review and launch. So it's a lot of technical skills, but they're super useful and fun to learn, especially when you were activating on new platforms all the time. So same thing, we just learned TikTok about 2 months ago, but it's been fun and it's been interesting for sure.
And John?
Yeah, so my role within the ad creation process is overseeing that the programs are kicked off correctly. So there's a tendency when clients need a program that they want it immediately, right? But they don't provide all the information, or we don't have all the information. So making sure we get everybody in the room to get all the information up front, everything we need to lay out timelines and to lay out proper budgets and the strategy. And then the team will go and execute those campaigns, and we'll move to the next one. If it's a first-time client, a lot of the work that I will do is getting them onboarded within the digital platforms. So we might need to set up a credit line for them on Facebook. We might need to set up a business account for them on Pinterest. We might need to share assets like ad accounts or pixels, or set up pixels so we can track things. One thing that we were doing yesterday for a new client, we were trying to run some app download campaigns, but we need some technical details from the app developer. And so the app developer has to pass some details along to us. And so we're setting up meetings and getting that information so that we can properly measure actions related to those campaigns. And of course, everything changes in the digital space. So Apple iOS 14 is coming out. It's going to let users opt out from being able to be tracked on their devices. And so with that, there's a lot of changes. It limits the number of things that we can track. And so we have to go to all of our clients and explain the changes and let them know all the things that we're going to be doing to make sure that they're prepared for when this change occurs in the next, a couple of weeks. So there's a lot going on with those. And then, we're also at that same time watching the campaigns that are live in the market.
And it's critical to get those set up right at the very beginning correctly. Then, I mean, that's a huge part. So yes. All right, Benjie.
Yeah, totally. So I help with more of the creative side. So my goal is to create these strategies ahead of time and the brief. So it's kind of a weird situation from a Chevrolet perspective, because that's the one account I work on now. We have a larger brand agency of Commonwealth, and Weber Shandwick handles all the social. So I make sure to stay as close as possible to the brand strategists themselves, or the specific vehicle strategists. And as they develop what their brief is going to be and their strategy, I then work with them to then mold a social specific brief, which then I take to our creative team. And that's kind of our kickoff is usually a brief. I give them some thought starters. I give them some opportunities to explore different platforms. So, if one campaign seems like it's going to be better on a Facebook or a Twitter, I'll make sure that recommendation's there. From that point, I'll often set them up with some of the vendors. So, a Twitter, a Facebook, an Instagram, et cetera. So depending on which platform direction we're starting to head into, we'll look into what their creative is able to offer in terms of kind of uniqueness. Team loves to be, kind of first to do something on social media. So for example, a recent campaign, we were one of the first to do the branded like on Twitter. So just being able to set up those opportunities throughout is one thing that, I kind of do there. And then throughout the campaign process, I make sure to stay close to make sure things are staying on strategy. So once creative is starting to be in concepting and they're doing it, you got to make sure to keep them and help them understand what actually can work on social platforms and what is a crazy pie in the sky idea. Is gotta love creatives and the way that they express themselves, but sometimes can't be held within the bounds of social media. So just have to make sure to rein them in a little bit. And then I help usually from platform specific things when we're getting ready to launch to guide them towards what is actually going to be happening. And then once we're live on the channels, I just help to make sure that the analytics then is going to be measured correctly, and then we bring it all home.
Excellent. Jenn?
Yeah, and similar, mine's very, very similar to John's response. I'm making sure everything is set up correctly, working with people at Shelby's level to make sure that they have all the tools and resources that they need to get all of the information set up correctly in platform. Occasionally I go into platform. Some of our teams on some of our brands are really small. So we don't have everybody that we would necessarily need. So sometimes I'll go in, I'll change copy, I'll QA, I'll do whatever is needed to make sure that everything that we have for a particular campaign or a launch or whatever is set up as it's supposed to be. So I'm more of an overseeing, but occasionally I step in and meddle as well.
Excellent. All right, and I know, and this is coincidental as well, but I know you all know each other, you've worked with each other in some capacity, but can you tell us how you interact with your fellow panelists in their roles on a daily basis?
Yeah, I'm already off mute, so I'll start. With my position, somebody like Benjie, on more of a strategic side of things, I would work with on a higher level basis to incorporate POVs for our clients. Clubhouse is actually a great example. We have our strategy team and people who are similar to Benjie's role, who I reach out to say, you know, what do we have? What information do we have on Clubhouse? Do we have any POVs moving forward right now? What is everything that's available? And working with that strategy team to make sure that we have all the information that we can send to clients and have the POV ready for that specific client as well. For somebody like Shelby, she would be somebody who is on my team, who is going in, implementing campaigns, and helping them to grow in their position, learn more about media as a whole, and really work with them on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they have all the resources that they need, they have all the training, the tools that they need, and that they're getting exposure to clients and getting as much information as possible. And then John and I actually probably have a pretty similar role, but if he's focusing more on the search side, I would work with somebody like John from search and social standpoints to make sure that our goals all align, to make sure that we're delivering the optimal strategy between the channels for our clients. So we do work with, I would say that yes, social and even search are in silos sometimes, but we do try and work with other channels and everything to make sure that we have the optimal media mix for our clients, and that it's going to deliver the best results for them.
That was very comprehensive. Does anyone want to add to that? And
I can, because we work together. So Kendra and I will touch base for new business. So if there's a new business opportunity, we might be in a brainstorm, we might be getting briefed from another leadership team member, or even a client. If there's onboarding meetings, sometimes Kendra is the lead for that client. So we'll be, onboarding a client to get their credit line set up, or whatever needs to happen as a first step between the client program and the agency. And then if something goes wrong, right? If we have to talk about, staffing, or
come on, nothing ever goes wrong.
Hiring or campaign, whatever that might be, any high level conversations. And so, but I think Jenn gave a good overview of how some of us would work across different roles. I think I can, speak like for Benjie's role. If Benjie's working in a creative agency, my role in relation to that might be working with the creative agency to make sure that they have the specs for the ads. So maybe not at my level providing the specs, but we might have brainstorms together. We might have innovation sessions where we bring different ideas to the clients, or we might be doing a joint presentation on, a new strategy, or, reporting on how a large program had worked.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll hop in just from my end, since I am on more the creative side. It's always unique as to kind of how we're working with other teams. So someone like John and Jenn, what we might do is we come up with a lot of the creative, and we'll kind of show, hey, here's what we want to do, and then we'll work with the media team to kind of wrangle back and forth. Obviously, creative always wants their stuff out there. Media knows what the smart way to spend the money is, and so you kind of get that back and forth and find that happy medium of what makes sense and how to place these ads correctly. So you're making the smart investment, but you're also making sure that the creative that you've created gets seen by who you want it to get seen by. And then along those lines, kind of what I mentioned earlier, I'll work with other strategy teams on audiences and making sure that we're hitting the right pieces, because being in that silo of social media, have to make sure that it's still aligning to the larger brand goals, even if their goals are more television related and all that stuff. You want to make sure that people are getting that true second screen experience from a social perspective, and so making sure that whatever audiences they're trying to reach are being reached from us. So that's just kind of a little bit of a different viewpoint on that stuff.
Yeah, and then I would say, like, at the associate and the senior associate level, we're working closely with the content analysts to make sure that the specs are on spot and everything is streamlined as fast as possible to activate. So making sure that the creatives are the right size and they're for the right placements within Facebook, if they're going to run feed, or if they're going to be Instagram stories, or if they're going to be Snapchat lenses, that type of thing. And then also we're really close to just making sure we're going to the right landing page and our creatives are aligning with where they're linking out to when the user is clicking on them, that type of thing. So that's how I would work with.
And one common theme in one word is collaboration. I mean, all of us. And I guess the second word would be flexibility. So really being able to adjust and flex and listen, but then also be able to apply what you've heard in a true collaborative form. And I think that's really the beauty of all of us working together, is truly that collaborative spirit. All right, moving on to software. So when it comes to software, and we're gonna broaden that out to software, tools, tech, we could even branch out to data, because that's clearly what, you know, the space that all of us live in. But what are the skills that you really need to do your job? And if you think from an entry level perspective, but then sort of where you are today and what that looks like. So Shelby, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, so I would say coming from college into a media agency, a lot of your day-to-day softwares that you're using aren't going to be accessible at the college level. We use Prisma to place buys, and we're building campaigns in platforms that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. So something I would say to utilize that are their free resources is Snapchat has trainings. Facebook has trainings that are free, but the test is more on the expensive side. Your agency will usually cover it. But there's all of these avenues through the social platforms that you can take to start learning and putting these certificates that are free on your resume that show that you really have an interest in paid social. So I would highly recommend doing that first. And almost every platform has one. Snapchat or Pinterest has a Pinterest University. It's free. It's like a 2-hour training. But then I would say your Excel skills are probably the most important, because even your media buys, Jenn taught me how to place a media buy in Excel, and I will never forget the day, because I honestly was like, I will never actually know how to do this. And now I do it every day. So Excel is the #1 priority, I would say, going into a media agency. You'll use it every single day.
All right, great. How about you, Jenn?
I would agree that having Excel skills are important, but being able to speak to those Excel skills, because I think everyone says, yeah, I can use Excel, but you know, if you're in an interview, being able to say, I can create pivot tables, or I can do VLOOKUPs. Maybe there's another few functions that you know how to do, or you think might be helpful. And saying that you can do those things is much more helpful than just saying, hey, I know how to use Excel. Of course, we use PowerPoint and things like that, but PowerPoint's a little easier to do. It's not as technical. And a lot of us have team members at our agency that are in like the new business department or things like that that will create templates if we need to. So it's not as much of a worry. But I think the communication skills are really important. Not like so much of how to send an email. I mean, that's certainly important, but how to interact with your colleagues and, you know, say yes to things. You know, there's always going to be asks, and there's always going to be things that might not be exactly what we had been planned to do or what was intended to do, but we had to find solutions to get them done. So, you know, figuring out a way to get things done, and instead of, you know, being defensive if an additional program comes in that you hadn't planned for. I don't think anybody on this panel starts their day and has the same day that they intended to have. So like your day is going to change all day long. You can't plan to have everything laid out perfectly. And so you have to go in there and adjust and not expect to know what's going to happen. And so when that happens, you have to be able to, you know, maintain a positive attitude, interact with your colleagues, and, you know, adjust timelines and adjust programs to get those things done.
Yeah, exactly. Benjie?
Yeah, totally. So that definitely will third Excel. It's still an important part, even, you know, from my role. I don't do, you know, from a media perspective. It's definitely from an analytics perspective, being able to see the data from a raw and know how you can formulate the numbers. I would also say, kind of reiterating Shelby's point of exploring all the platforms. You know, while you can't access some of these tools, we use tools like Opal and Koros, and these are kind of planning and community management, and then Brandwatch for analytics and social listening. Use some of the tools out there that are available to you. You know, you can see some of your analytics on Twitter just by going to analytics.twitter.com. TikTok offers these creator portals where you can see some education on how to best kind of create some of that stuff. I would look kind of from behind the scenes if you have access or the ability to create a Facebook business account, just to look at Ad Manager, familiarize yourself with some of that back end stuff that's available to pretty much anyone. If you're in a Facebook group, there's access to analytics a lot of times. So just kind of becoming familiar with what the platforms offer is definitely important and can help you understand a little bit more thoroughly, you know, what kind of goes in day to day. You know, while there's a different format in a, you know, fancier tool that'll be sold to a big organization, when you get down to it, it's all kind of the same. So that's kind of my viewpoint on it.
Excellent. Jenn?
Yeah. So on top of definitely knowing Excel and just trying to familiarize yourself, I know there's a lot of free webinars and free tools that you can use to really figure out how to do things within Excel. If you come in to an entry-level position and tell me that you know how to use a pivot table and VLOOKUP, I'm like, great, sign you up right now. Because that is a big part of the early days of training for sure. So on top of all that, we do have certain tools that are native to Reprise and that kind of stuff that are analyzing social media platforms as it relates to share of voice and competitive. So a lot of agencies will have their own proprietary tools in terms of reporting as well. But the main things that you would need to know to like at least get your foot in the door, have some entry level knowledge of Excel, how things work, how to do formulas, how to really get all things together, know how to keep a to-do list. As John and others have mentioned, we are extremely flexible in our days, but still having that management of your time and being able to see what the tasks are that you need to complete and the steps that you need to complete them. So having some rudimentary way of keeping track of those is always important, just for getting your foot in the door. And then being able, as I mentioned, to problem solve is a huge, huge thing just to get your foot in the door. So even the technical things like the ads managers, all of the different ads managers are basically based on Facebook. Those are easy enough to teach and have people learn the technical side of those things. But it's really those skills that come into play that are going to be more important for you starting out.
All right, so we're nearly we're a little over halfway through. And just want to remind everybody, we've got a few more questions, but please use the Q&A function and ask questions, because the back half of the 15 or 20 minutes we want to spend hearing from the audience. So with that, let's see here. Oh, how about this? And honestly, I think this could be by far one of the most important questions, as well as the answers that you're going to give today, particularly given our current business environment. But please tell the audience how you've established connections early on in your career and how those connections have benefited you, but then also how you're staying connected with your key cohorts. So, Shelby?
Yeah, so I was really lucky in college. I was the president of my ad club, and I had an amazing professor. Her name is Sheila Sasser at Eastern, and she was on the education committee for Adcraft. So she would take us to almost every event she possibly could, and she would literally push us into people she wanted us to meet. And that is how I met my first boss, Michelle, at Ford Day. And so also my ad club, we would go to Adcraft events, and then we would make a competition out of it to see how many business cards we could get. We would just network as much as we possibly could. And we would make a game out of it. And all those connections that I met in college, I became really close with when I started working at Adcraft, and then throughout my career. And then now I would say it's a lot harder just being virtual, but still, like, feel free to reach out to us after these panels. We would love to chat with the students that are on this call. I still check in with my ad club and present to them. So I think it's a little harder when it's virtual, but I would still recommend reaching out and chatting over LinkedIn.
Excellent. John?
Yeah, when I was in college, I wasn't in the advertising clubs because of my journalism experience, but there certainly were a lot of people that were working with me at newspapers that also transitioned. So there's people that I was like interning with at newspaper in Lansing that are now selling media for Turner Sports or ESPN, and so that helped me meet a lot of people on the the publisher side. There's also like a advertising basketball league that I play with, or we used to, at least before everything happened. And so there's a number of people in the office that actually I was able to refer to the agency because we play basketball together. And so a lot of us know each other from from that, or just having worked with people in the beginning of my career. You know, Benjie and I worked together on some of the same accounts, you know, maybe 8 or so years ago, but you know, each of us now certainly work with people that have worked with one another in different agencies or cross paths with one another. I think that probably each of us on this panel are probably at least like a first or second connection with each other on LinkedIn, and probably know, you know, 50 of the same people because the advertising industry is so small. I think, Kendra, you kind of kicked things off too about not burning bridges being mentioned in the previous session. And I think that's important because you're going to run into the same people all the time. Again, you know, 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Exactly. Benjie?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, some of what John said, you know, as you know, him and I worked together 8, 9 years ago, and so just being able to keep in touch with people. I also didn't take the traditional path into advertising, so I wasn't in the college clubs or anything like that. So what I've done since then, and what I did early in my career, was make sure to you know, just kind of keep in touch with everyone, reach out to people. You never know who's going to have a connection for you, or someone you know. And then, you know, it comes into like, hey, you work with a vendor, and it's very easy to ignore vendors a lot of times, but a lot of these vendors then jump around to different places where suddenly you might need them. So just understanding, you know, kind of where some of these people are going, and knowing that, as John said, you know, especially in Detroit, the advertising world is very small. So you're likely to cross paths with people multiple times. So just kind of keep in touch with people that you worked with. You know, for me, you know, I talk to people all the time that I worked with at Campbell Ewald, you know, 9, 10 years ago, to people, you know, who I have left, you know, Weber Shandwick that I'm at now. So I always want to keep in touch with people.
Great. Jenn? So I should be expecting a call from you, Benjie. Jenn?
Yeah, so when I was at MSU, I made a lot of connections because of where I worked while I was at State. So I worked in the Career Services Center for the Business College at MSU. So I was actually able to see all the recruiters that came in and do all that sort of stuff, setting up the interviews. So I was actually able to make some connections that way, which is how I ended up getting my 2 internships while I was at college, because I was able to see who was coming in and then set up interviews and all that sort of stuff. So that was fun. I joined some of the ad clubs as well while I was at MSU. I can't say I still talk to those people very much, but you know, that happens. With Adcraft though, the first AdCon I attended, I met someone, Amanda Zangrilli is her name, and she works in Florida now. But we became really close, instant friends. She set me up with Adcraft. She told me everything about what I needed to do to meet people and get connected and all that sort of stuff. So what was really important was finding a mentor in Amanda to help me through that. And while I would say we're more colleagues than a mentor-mentee relationship now, we stay in touch on social media. We stay in touch on like Facebook and LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff. So really connecting with those people on a personal level, staying in touch via social media. I follow Shelby on Instagram. So, and LinkedIn is a really good way to do that too. Occasionally I'll still reach out to people that I have mentored, and you know, just see how things are going in their careers, see how they're doing, because you never know when I have open positions and need to hire people as well. So I'll stay in touch with all of them through the social channels.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we are on to question time. So we've got 4 terrific questions. So let's see here, I'm gonna go in order. Let's see here, Cammie. So here's the question, the first one off the bat. How important is Pinterest to today's social media landscape?
I can start with that one. So from the kind of organic strategic perspective, we look at Pinterest very much like a organic search engine. So in a lot of ways, it's an image search. It's essentially number 2 to Google and YouTube as to what you're looking for and able to find on there. So we look at, I like to say it ages like a fine wine. So you put some pins on there and they can really gain a lot of interest over time. So, from that perspective, we like to make sure to have things always on that platform. And especially from a contextual standpoint, the Pinterest releases trends every single year. And these really hold true as to what people are looking for and interested in. So, gaming is huge, but from an automotive perspective, perspective this year, car date nights are really big, and how can you explore things in your car since you're not using it in the traditional driving every day to work sense. And we'd like to take advantage of those kind of nuggets. And as the pins get out there and then they continue to grow, we appear in different search engines and search, that people are throwing out there that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And so it's become a really big part of what we like to do from at least an organic standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you, Benjie. We have a question here. Hi, Shreyas. And his question is, what has been the campaign you are the most proud of and why? And I'd love for everyone to answer that. So whoever wants to kick it off first.
Yeah, I can start. Unilever is very political and they're very in the moment. So I've got the chance to work on a lot of Black Lives Matter campaigns, a lot of campaigns lifting up healthcare workers during COVID. So those are some of the coolest campaigns that I've ever been a part of, like almost give you goosebumps while you're working on them. So watching them go live and watching the response it's great.
I would say I can go as well. So for my campaigns that I was most proud of, it's funny. So I've worked at the startup I mentioned earlier. So I got to help launch that brand from the very beginning. And so seeing that come to fruition is something that's really unique. And then I also have helped my friends launch their brand Monger's Provisions in Detroit. It's a cheese and charcuterie place. So two of my best friends started that. So I've helped them launch the brand from the beginning and help establish their social channels. And just seeing the growth and seeing the people who become interested in the brand is definitely something that, becomes the most proud of what I'm looking to do, and knowing that like somebody's starting from scratch.
Monger's Provision is awesome, by the way.
Yes.
I would say, so my proudest is probably, I worked on a campaign for Ally Bank, and we won a couple of Shorty Awards for it. So we ran their Ally Lucky Penny campaign, where around the country we had pennies that were placed around major cities, and people could find them and enter them and win money. So it was a big contest, which is always a more fun project to work on versus trying to get people to sign up for bank accounts. But we got to go to New York and go to the Shorty Awards and receive our award for gold and silver for the financial services category. So it was really exciting. It was really fun. And it was one of the first campaigns that I managed as a social media manager by myself. So that was the one I was probably most proud of.
For me, it would be, I worked on a campaign for GMC a few years ago where we were one of the few brands that were allowed to advertise on Instagram. Before Instagram came what it is today, you had to be invited to advertise there because they wanted a very specific aesthetic to be on their platform, and we were chosen to be a brand. So we convinced the client to let us take a brand new fully loaded GMC Yukon and just travel around the Grand Canyon area, and we took a bunch of pictures and made videos and made all this content and showed what you could do with it. So we filled the trunk with camping gear and then made all these Instagram shots and put paid social support behind it. And then we leveraged all these influencers to do the same thing. And it became a huge campaign where all the different things you can do with your Yukon. So it was one of the first campaigns on Instagram. We were pretty pleased about that.
Awesome, great stuff. Let's see, we've got a question here from Sarah at Western. And her question is, what accomplishments do you feel set you apart in the industry? Any takers?
I'll bite on this one. There is a tendency to in the advertising industry to go after a lot of awards, maybe more so in a creative capacity. There's a lot of awards and things like that, which is great to get acknowledgement. I think Detroit can be somewhat overlooked sometimes in the advertising space, so it's great that we're highlighting the work. But for me, I think it's just knowing about the platforms and understanding the space. I think after you are in the space for so long, it might become just so common to you that you don't realize how much you actually know about the inner workings of Facebook or how to execute a media buy. And so for us doing these things every day, it's normal, but to other people that don't work in this capacity, it's very unique. And I think we're in a very small set of people that actually know how these programs run. There's not from a paid perspective, there's not a lot of people that do this. It really is a very, very small industry.
Anyone else on this one?
As far as accomplishments that set you out in what we do, some accomplishments would be like winning new business. Obviously, it's a huge, huge feat to be able to go in against other agencies who are also doing fantastic, great work, and still say that you were able to gain the client's trust, you were able to establish a good connection with the client, and then ultimately win their business. So I would say those are huge accomplishments. If there's accomplishments you're looking for, when I was reading this question, I was like, is it accomplishments like our accomplishments now, or like accomplishments you would want to have to get into the industry? And accomplishments you would want to have to get into the industry is any sort of professional experience, and being able to show to somebody who's looking to hire you that you can do the work of somebody who needs to multitask, of somebody who needs to be in that professional environment and handle themselves in appropriate manners. So I would say to get in, having professional experience is obviously an accomplishment that you want to have on your resume to be able to get into the industry.
Yeah, and then I would say not industry specific, but in the agency, especially at a lower level, I think something that will set you apart is how you tackle problems and if you tackle them versus running away from them. So something that I've seen a lot recently, our team is starting to own trafficking tags and owning Prisma more. And a lot of people will say, oh, that's not my job, or, oh, we didn't do that before, so we're not going to do that now. Where I take it kind of as a personal challenge. I want to be able to perfect it. I don't want to run away from it. I want to be able to answer those questions when they come up. So I would say just tackling things as they come up instead of trying to ignore them or avoid taking on more work. Just tackle them and prove you can do it.
Excellent. Very good examples. Here's another one from Western, and this is from Catherine. And what is the biggest challenge you faced when you first started in the industry?
I could take that one. So from my perspective, I was coming in, switching professions totally, and I just actually got my master's degree from Wisconsin, and then I was looking for a new job, but I had no advertising experience. I was straight up, I had some journalism experience, I had some managerial experience when I was at the Tigers, but just not having experience it was tough to help me crack into the industry. So, you know, I took internships that I wouldn't have necessarily taken in you know, kind of normal day and age, and just making sure that I can also help kind of prove knowledge, do research on some of the trends, understand what's happening in the landscape. You know, back then it was, you know, only really at Facebook and Twitter. And so it was just kind of seeing what's out there and really trying to break in and show that there's a base knowledge of what we're looking to do. And then, you know, try to prove once you're in, that's always been my thing, is kind of proving myself from there. And then you can, you know, anything's possible once you kind of create that role for yourself.
I can also go. Like Benjie, I switched careers at the beginning of my career, but when we graduated, there was a big economic downturn. So like we graduated and had no experience. Then after we had a year or two experience, the economy collapsed. There were no jobs. And so I think for a lot of us, it was like 3 or 4 years of like, what are we supposed to do? And I think a lot of us moved around a little bit. It was very hard for us to get noticed. And my first advertising job was at Campbell Ewald, and I had been turned down for jobs from them twice. The third time I finally got in. I remember I was turned down for an internship with Little Caesars, and then I was hired as their social media manager like 5 years later. So I think don't be discouraged. You will send a lot of resumes out. You will get a lot of no's. Some of those companies that said no will eventually end up hiring you, and it'll be interesting to look back on eventually.
All right, here's another question. Let's see here. What was something you did during your, and this is from Elena. So what was something you did during your college career that really set you up for success in your entry-level experience?
I worked a bunch of jobs. I had my part-time job at the business center. I had 2 internships that were vastly different in terms of experience. I had one that was PR at a law firm and one that was website development at a consulting firm. So very, very different experiences and a whole bunch of them. And I know that's really hard when you're trying to also study and do well on tests and all that sort of stuff. I found the work experience more important than my school experience. I will put that in that way. I found that it was much more valuable for me to spend my time working and gaining those professional skills than it was to be active in class. Not to not be active in class, but like still do that. But professional experience is good.
Yeah, same. I took on every project I possibly could. I was doing organic social media for a law firm out of Chicago. For freelance, I was serving on the dean's board. I was taking up research assistant positions, just anything to build my resume, especially heading into my senior year. So, and then networking as much as humanly possible.
All right, and here's a question. Let's see here. They're coming in. I think we have probably 6 or 7 more to answer. So I know we won't get through all of them. So I apologies if we don't get to your questions, but here's one from Lee. Many of you had mentioned breaking into the TikTok platform. I'm curious what steps go into finding a strategy on a new platform and what difficulties come with it.
Yeah, totally. So I can answer that one since I've just been in the process of kind of establishing the strategy and all that stuff. So, one of the most difficult things is helping people understand what a platform entails. And so, my part of the process is getting all the audience data possible, meeting with the reps of the business. Obviously, they're going to sell it as this is the greatest thing in the world, but you really got to be able to dig inside as to what that is. And from there, it's just getting, especially, if you're on the agency side, getting clients comfortable with the process of being on this platform and understanding if it's right for them. Last February is when I first introduced TikTok to the Chevrolet family, and they were very much against it. It's a very young audience, they weren't prepared. And at that time, for how TikTok has progressed, a year later, it went from 54 million active users to now over 100 million active users in the US. The age shifted from purely Gen Z now into a little bit of an older audience. And it's just helping them see the progression of certain platforms that they might be a little skeptical on at the beginning, and then making sure that when you are ready to get on there, you have the right approach. You can't just be like, cool, I want to be on TikTok, and then you're on TikTok. You want to make sure that you're approaching it with like, hey, we want to be on TikTok. Here's the audience we want to reach, and here's how we're going to do it. So then you're not just kind of blanketly jumping at the opportunity and going in without a plan.
Okay, great. Here's another question. This is from Central Michigan, from Kara. Let's see here. Hopefully this doesn't happen very often or even at all, but if it does, and the answer is yes, it does, because I read the question. How do you guys handle a situation where audiences are not reacting positively to content that is put out, and you need to act quickly to make sure a brand's reputation isn't damaged on social? Any takers on that?
I can respond. This isn't something that I do now. It's certainly something I did earlier in my career. If the fans or the followers or the people that are seeing the ads are not reacting favorably, it's already too late to have a strategy in place. So you have to have a plan ahead of time. There should be approved messaging from the clients on what can be shared, what can be responded to. If there is some sort of crisis, then there needs to be a crisis plan. Is it okay to turn the ads off? Is it okay to limit comments? Some brands will say yes, some brands will say no. It really depends on what the negativity is. I've heard people say that if you delete comments or remove the ability to comment, people will just come back further. I've seen other CMOs say, I'm not going to use my advertising platforms as a way for people to trash my brand. So it really depends on what the company strategy is. And again, formulating that strategy before a problem happens, or, adapting your strategy after a problem happens to make sure that it's adjusted. But absolutely, there will be negative comments to just about anything that's put in the social space, paid organic. So there needs to be people and mechanisms to handle that.
And I think you nailed that. It's all about having that strategy ahead of time, having it prepared, thinking of the different things that could happen, and really having that roadmap and everything approved so you can put that plan into action and put in place. All right, one last question, because we have 4 minutes. We may be able to squeak in 2. This is from Sarah at Western. What's something that would surprise us about your day-to-day? So an element of surprise.
Maybe the hours. I don't
Not
know
enough?
if it's I don't know if it's a surprise that advertising and particularly social media is not a 9-to-5 job. So hopefully that's not a surprise to you guys, but if it is, that's what this is. So the other night we were on at midnight turning on and off ads because we had client direction too. We work weekends, we work nights,
Holidays.
holidays, especially if you're working in retail. Best Buy, when I worked on them, they had deals for Black Friday. You had to be ready to go to promote things, take things down, all sorts of fun stuff. So social is definitely not a 9-to-5 if you're expecting that.
Excellent. All right. And I think just so we can get to our next session starting here in 2 minutes. So I want to thank all of the panelists. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to all the students that attended. So we greatly appreciate that. And hopefully the rest of your afternoon you find to be fulfilling. And